Hi to those who are watching from home. I'm happy to see crowded room again. Please, those in the back, if you can also try to come forward so that if more people will arrive later, there will be some spaces. There are still some empty chairs here in the first rows. And my name is Rita Lucarelli. I'm an associate hundreds of press articles and constant academic contributions and engagement across the globe. Bazian is known as an organic intellectual, a term used for scholars who directly connect their work and scholarship to people and are not confined to academia's constructed walls of separation. Bazian is a leading scholar in the Islamophobia studies field, having founded the Islamophobia Studies Center, editor-in-chief of the Islamophobia Studies Journal, and co-founder and current president of the International Islamophobia Studies and Research Association. And Bazian also co-founded Zaytuna College, the first accredited Muslim liberal arts college in the United States, and is a lecturer in the departments of Middle Eastern languages and cultures and Asian diaspora studies at the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Kate Feldman is an associate professor of ethnic studies at the University of California, Berkeley, where he also serves as department chair. And Dr. Feldman's research program takes cultural studies approaches to theorize and narrate the interface between race, culture, knowledge, and state power. His work explores race as a master category, as a medium, by crafting comparative, relational, intersectional, and transnational analysis situated in localized and embodied context. Feldman is the author of A Shadow Over Palestine, The Imperial Life of Race in America, as well as more than 2,000 articles and book chapters in Palestine studies, critical ethnic studies, and transnational American studies. A Shadow Over Palestine received also the 2017 Best Book in Humanities and Cultural Studies from the Association for Asian American Studies, and was a finalist for the American Studies Association's 2016 Laura Romero First Book Publication Prize. Dr. Feldman is also one of the faculty co-organizers of The Color of New Media, a working group sponsored by the Center for Race and Gender and the Berkeley Center for New Media that focuses on intersections of critical race theory, gender and women studies, and transnational studies with new media studies. And finally, Dr. Ussama Makdisi is professor of history and chancellor's chair at the University of California, Berkeley, and is the author of multiple award-winning books, the most recent being Age of Coexistence, The Ecumenical Frame, and the Making of the Modern Arab World. Today's talk is entitled Islamophobia, Race, and the Racialization of Palestine, and we'll discuss how the concept of racism is critical for apprehending the conditions of livability in Palestine and for Palestinians. We would like to remind you also that all events in the Let's Talk About Palestine teaching series are live streamed on our departmental Facebook page and YouTube channel that you can Google, looking for MELC, Middle Eastern Languages and Culture Department, and are coordinated indeed by our department and co-sponsored by the Department of Ethnic Studies, the the Department of Rhetoric, the Program in Critical Theory, the International Consortium of Critical Theory Programs, and the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. If you have questions, please write them down on the slip of paper that you should have found on your chair. If you didn't find it, there are more here. We will collect all your questions soon after the lectures. And finally, we invite you also to join us for the remaining two events in the series, all held at 4 p.m. in this very room. On March 14, Samira Ismail and Wadi Said will present on apartheid, occupation, and the law, followed by a conversation moderated by Hatem Bazian. And on April 16, Ahmad Diab and Stefania Pandolfo will present on Palestinian literature and the writing of trauma, followed by a conversation moderated by Mohammed Wajid Ben Ahmed. And it's time to leave the stage to our speakers.
Palestinians are the last of the modern colonial subjects. They are the victims of racism, discrimination on a daily basis. Their very existence is denied by many. Their culture is belittled. Their history is distorted. These are the words of Edward Said. He also adds, the struggle for Palestinian liberation is fundamentally a fight against the dehumanization forces of colonialism and racism, which seek to erase their identity and rights. Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. So today's joint lecture is entitled Islamophobia, Race, and the Racialization of Palestine. Myself, I will speak on Orientalism, Islamophobia, and the dehumanization of Palestinians. Islamophobia is a variety of Orientalism that can be understood within the framework of Said's trilogy, covering Islam, Orientalism, and the question of Palestine, which I insist must be read in conversation. A second part in my talk will link to Jack Shaheen's work on real bad Arabs and the long trajectory of demonization of Arabs, Muslims, and in particular Palestinians that form the basis and the content of Said's latent Orientalism. In the last part of my talk, I'll transition to the war on terror that develops the infrastructure of perpetual war, of global reach, and the contemporary civilizational mission with the Palestinian posited as the unredeemable, archetypal, and persistent protagonist to all the good things that Western triumphalism offers. Here, Israel and Zionism role in the post-Cold War era as the frontline state keeping the barbarians outside the gate of civilizations. Yet we don't know where the gate is. If not better, as we currently see, to be totally removed from the earth altogether in Gaza and other places. Let me offer just definition for Orientalism for those who don't know. Orientalism is a matter of regularized or orientalized writing, vision, and study, dominated by imperatives, perspectives, and ideological biases, ostensibly suited to the Orient. It is really the image of the Orient. Second, let me give you a definition of Islamophobia, which we work with in the Center for Race and Gender here at Berkeley. Islamophobia is a structural organizing tool located at the contemporary racial, gender, and class crossroads. It is employed to rationalize, extend, and reinvigorate Western power hierarchies while embarking on a project for silencing the global other. Often people, when they think about Islamophobia, they think that it's a discussion about Islam rather than the racialization of Muslims as it relates to Islam. So in this sense, when we say Muslim in the contemporary period or Islam, it should be understood as a racial category due to the process of racialization. Three of Said's books are timely today as the day they were published almost 6 years ago, Orientalism, Question of Palestine, and Covering Islam. The three constitute Said Muslims have always been the cultural other, seen as different, as threatening in terms of race and religion, and depicted as brutal, heartless, uncivilized religious fanatics bent on terrorizing civilized Westerners. Shaheen reminds us that in the mid-1980s, filmmaking of the production company Canon, formed by the producers of Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, the Israeli director of the film industry department, who teamed up to make 26 hate and terminate the Arab movies, including Hell Squad and the Delta Force, both of which featured Palestinian villains. One can hardly find any positive or redeemable Palestinian character across the 20th century Hollywood and media production. This is precisely the construction of latent Orientalism and Islamophobia. More than half of the Palestinian movies, or the anti-Palestinian movies, were released in the 1980s and 90s. 19 from 1983 to 1989, 9 from 1990 to 1998. Absent from Hollywood's Israeli-Palestinian movies are human dramas, revealing Palestinians as normal folks. Computer specialists, domestic engineers, farmers, teachers, poets, and artists. Never do movies present Palestinians as innocent victims. Well, they can't be. And Israelis as brutal oppressors. They never were in Western imagination. Think of Piers Morgan, if anybody knows this personality, taunting and bullying every guest to utter a condemnation before being allowed to speak, to understand the impact of latent Orientalism. Just recall any Western reporter ever asking an Israeli spokesperson to condemn the killing of a single Palestinian. Have you heard a single Western reporter ask for a condemnation of the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh? 116 other journalists murdered in Gaza, 166 university professors. Never in our wildest imagination such a cadre of Western reporters will utter a word asking for condemnation. It's not surprising, while it should be, that the media, the political elites, university leadership, and intellectuals to immediately respond and believe every outrageous claim put forth by the Israeli government, the IDF, and its massive Hasbara network. They are only activating the already existent latent content on Palestinians and everything related to the Arab and Muslim worlds. It is clear at this moment, despite so much written material and an avalanche of content on the Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians, we still recycle some of the most racist, despicable depictions of people while witnessing a live-streamed genocide. Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims are invariably stereotyped as murderers, rapists, oil-rich dimwits, abusers of women, and jihadists. You could add to this list black beards, headdresses, dark sunglasses, oases, hook noses, belly dancers, limousine, harem maidens, oil wells, camels, I like camels, automatic weapons, and then never to forget, you cannot say in from the river to the sea, Allahu Akbar, right? And most recent entry, watermelons. Sweet fruit is triggering for being naturally aligned to a free Palestine is something that we are witnessing these days. To be honest, in preparing for this talk, I was tempted to begin by quoting from New York Times Thomas Friedman's Understanding the Middle East Through the Animal Kingdom. But I refrained from doing so since the column says more about his abode than the homes, places, or soul of my soul people that he constantly demonizes. Gaza today, one is at a loss to comprehend the sheer destruction and the sniffing out of hope faced by 2 million people. No food, no water, no medicine. For the Amalek, a call for genocide, closed entry and exit with total silence and complicity of most of the Western world and their client Arab and Muslim allies. So what is at work in here? Racism is the old and well-tested Western machine that situates Palestinians below the line of the human. I'll quote my colleague Ramon Grasfugel on this point. The people classified above the line of the human are recognized socially in their humanity as human beings, and thus enjoy access to rights, human rights, civil rights, women's rights, and or labor rights, material resources, and social recognition to their subjectivities, identities, epistemologies, and spiritualities. The people below the line of the human are considered subhuman or non-human. That is, their humanity is questioned and as such negated. Many of us are almost constantly doing the exercise of calling on the international community, calling on the Fourth Geneva Convention, calling on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, calling on the country club, the United Nations Security Council, to no avail, because we are at fault thinking that we are human, thus deserving human rights, not recognizing that we inhabit below the line of the human. Said analysis almost 20 years ago, and writing intuitively deconstructed the racialized lens used by Western academics, the press, and policymakers to justify their continued disregard for the needs and well-being of the Palestinians. But one can also add all Arab and Muslims in this sense. Arabs and Muslims can perish in the Mediterranean Sea and English Channel daily, and no one cares or even thinks it's a human calamity, because those dying don't look like the high-quality brand of humans coming from the Ukraine. Do we really mourn the subhuman when they die? Do we know their names, recall their hopes, dreams, and aspirations? Do we have a full montage on CNN, ABC, NBC, not Fox, of the type of life that these individuals lived and what was lost by their death? The unfolding genocide in Gaza provides an appropriate time to bring Said's view into play to understand the deepening crisis in the region. Even before Gaza, what should be our response and commentary on the events? Again, I list, not for exhaustive purposes, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Kashmir, Yemen. And what line of analysis should we pursue? Yes, today we're dealing with Palestine, but how many of us actually remember the name of the Iraqis that perished, or the names of those in Afghanistan from 1979 to just yesterday? Should we blame it was the Taliban, or should we actually think of the imperial world that used Afghanistan as the landscape to settle their own accounts, just like today settling the accounts on the Syrian landscape? Yes, Syrians can be seen as violent, but the United States is there, NATO is there, Russia is there, much of the Arab world have their forces there, and as such, we need to have a correct view and analysis of the situation. It's important to recall that Said's Orientalism covering Islam and the question of Palestine emerged around and in the aftermath of the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, Lebanese Civil War, and the Iranian Revolution. Does it sound familiar? The same areas facing intervention and demonization today. It is because the people inhabit the subhuman, or is it the region that continue to offer the oil, the gas, the resources, as well as the trade routes that facilitate our domination? Israel and Zionism are a variety of Western settler colonialism. It acts and responds within the same supremacist, exceptionalist epistemic violence, ethnic cleansing, transfer, and genocide. These are normative, not exceptional. A cursory examination of Western history and thought is sufficient illustration. Post 9/11, Western academics and press reports focus on the now, just like the crop of contemporary Orientalist and Islamophobic practitioners that cover the unfolding events in Gaza. The disintegration of Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Libya, and Yemen was presented without context and no examination of the long road that led to the current condition. So history begins on October 7th for everyone, and it becomes the mark of meaning, humanity, empathy, ethics, and for sure, revengeful violence. 9/11 became a mark of history. What happened before is immaterial. What happened after is seen as justified. All those who come out of their settler colonial caves, and we have many in this area, are writing and reporting on the subject matter as if they are dealing with an animal lab, operating clinically to describe the small and big movement without ever asking how, why, and what stimuli brought this about. Critically, many who write, report, and examine developments in Palestine do so from the comfortable distance of a Western capital, a secure think tank with Orientalist thinking inside the tank, a university post with graduate students to translate the difficult native language. And even when on rare occasion they make it to the high-end hotels in a given conflict zone, they never venture beyond its confines and the few cafes or bars that cater to their fine taste. On this occasion, the Israeli side of the border and as embedded experts. Notice not a single Western press agency is reporting from inside Gaza. Let me repeat. Not a single Western press agency is reporting from inside Gaza, the center of the global crisis today, but yet not a single Western press agency is actually made it to the ground. You have a better chance actually covering Mars than actually covering Gaza. CNN made it for a few hours, but that's it. Reported on a Shifa behind an Israeli tank, for sure. For Western colonial media in Gaza, the lens of the camera is indistinguishable from the sniper scope. For Western colonial media in Gaza, the lens of the camera is indistinguishable from the sniper scope. One kills the child with a bullet. The media erases the child from our collective consciousness. What would Said say about the ongoing carnage, both the physical and, more importantly, the mental disfiguration masquerading as sound academic research and intellectual pursuits? Despite the passing of almost 45 years since Said's monumental works and hundreds, if not thousands, of papers, articles, editorials, conferences, and special reports about what we broadly call Palestine, the political elite has learned and applied less of what supposedly was studied. They are incapable. We care less about the lives and experiences of Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians today than the time that Edward Said put pen to paper to produce his works. Also, the new crop of Orientalists, and there are many of them these days, which has a new category of the Muslim Zionists, which we need also to understand. Let me say, the new crop of Orientalists, which has a new category of Muslim Zionists that cuts its bloodied shark teeth on war on terrorism funding and reforming Islam, reforming the Arab mind, reforming Palestinian society, think tank of embedded intellectuals, which have developed the habit of critiquing Said's work and blaming him for supposed failures in Palestine, the region, and setting in motion the so-called victimhood mentality. Misrepresenting Said has become the norm, and many who have not read him, nor the connected thread of scholarship that his work emerges from and converse with throughout his career. The trilogy of misrepresentation is found among media talking heads, empire-embedded academics, and political elites who daily leash a barrage of obfuscation, distortion, and sensationalization of Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. Current movies, books, and public discourses have repackaged every Orientalist trope and distortion into a new Islamophobic and racist entertainment industry that feasts on a heavy dose of the racialized Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim figure as the all-encompassing evil villain threatening life itself. Existing and newly formed academic fields with a plethora of embedded intellectuals have helped refine and produce the new crop of Orientalists who are committed to documenting the Palestinian Arab-Muslim subject as best as she can never imagine, and then offered a manifest destiny to bring civilization to the purported subhuman. Said's focus on the role of the intellectual is pertinent today. Now, I think Ussama will agree, we have not heard any of the liberal intellectual elite speak on anything pertaining to Gaza. I guess they're busy speaking about hugging the trees, which I like them to do. So Said focused on the role of the intellectual is pertinent today since embedded academics are feasting on empire's trough, filled with grants and projects intended to study the exotic Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim subject, to understand its proclivity to violence and resistance. You should not be able to resist, right? Indeed, the role of the intellectual has been eroded due to the encroachment of power, capitalism, and the narrowly constructed interests that pass for academia today. The refined sophistry and preoccupation with access to power circles, funding, and upward institutional mobility have laid waste to the university in its current configuration. The Orientalist imaginary still captured the minds of many, a dreamer of grandeur in the West, and a campaign afoot to discover, document, and civilize the East for their humanness necessitate the never-ending intervention. Said Orientalists of the past have produced an emboldened crop that utilizes an ideological and material shock and awe. So let me repeat. Orientalism of the past have produced an embedded crop that utilizes an ideological and material shock and awe epistemic to civilize the barbarians at the gate of civilizations. Flattening Gaza is the same shock and awe that was pushed for Iraq and Afghanistan. Now let me shift the conversation to the last section of my talk, War and Terror, and I will also link it to the Clash of Civilization discourse to make the loop and the circle. The grotesque crafted binary at foot, if Bernard Lewis's thesis, Clash of Civilization, have found a new emboldened lease on life, and a cadre of well-polished salesmen and saleswomen who have taken to the airwaves to frame, rally, and poison public sentiments. Said wrote about the clash of ignorance in response to Lewis's and Huntington's initial thesis. But today their ideas are driving elite policies and infecting public sentiments on replacement theory and blaming critical race theory for every ill in society. Maybe they should read first the critical race theory and Said just for beginners. Huntington and his ignorant embedded intellectuals frame it this way. And I want you to pay attention to this framing. This is page 20 in Huntington book. There can be no true friends without true enemies. Unless we hate what we are not, we cannot love what we are. Let me repeat, page 20, Huntington. There can be no true friends without true enemies. Unless we hate what we are not, we cannot love what we are. I know he missed Valentine's Day last week. He's excused because he's vested in hate. Right? Now, this means unless we hate the Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, we cannot love what we are. So again, to understand, this means unless we hate the Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, we could add other categories, we can't love what we are. I'm afraid to say that ignorance in this case is not bliss, is deadly dangerous. Understood correctly, Huntington Clash Civilization thesis is a call to affirm the worldview of the West, or more accurately, the United States, by drawing clear distinctions from the Islamic and Sinic civilizations. Here, the Chinese, Muslims, and Islam subjects, which are laser focused on the Palestinians, are instruments to forge an internal cohesion in the US that in Huntington's mind is missing at present and is needed to maintain and extend America's power and domination. Not surprisingly, Huntington's follow-up book framed the problem as one of diversity. Again, the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and asserted that the perceived Western weakness is due to multiculturalism, which in its essence, he said, is anti-European civilization. It is basically an anti-Western ideology. His words. In Who Are We? Huntington is framing it as a question and answering it by problematizing the increasing presence of Mexicans in the United States, muchas gracias, and viewing them as a threat to maintaining the cohesive nature of the country due to various factors that prevent assimilation into the American society. Taken together, Clash of Civilization and Who Are We provide an ideological blueprint for a new conceptualization of the problem that have beset right-wing and conservative agenda since the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movement. Precisely the emergence of Clash of Civilization thesis allowed for the state, the far right counter-jihad movement, the neoconservative movement, sizable segments of the transnational Zionist movement, Arab and Muslim despots, and assorted liberal groupings, Bill Maher, including the pro-war left and the new atheist movement, to unleash a barrage of Islamophobic discourses to rationalize the new world order and their central role in countering it. Palestinians occupy